week. Woo! Right. All right. All right. Hello. Welcome. It is so great to be here with you today. My name's Dion McGrath. I work at Global Optimism. It is a distinct pleasure to welcome you to New York, to Climate Week, to Mission 2025 event. Mission 2025, Tom and I actually had the distinct pleasure of being a part of the launch event a couple years ago in London. And we know that 2025 is a big year. We're halfway through what we're calling the decisive decade in climate. We're 10 years since Paris, and there's a big milestone coming up, COP30, on that journey. We all know this, and what are we looking for from COP? We're looking for clarity, we're looking for compensation, and we're looking for collaboration. Tom, over to you.
Great. Well, as you can see, you don't have to be able to moonlight as a podcaster to work at Global Optimism, but it really helps. And Fiona's doing
It really helps.
classic though. Yeah. So not only are we here to talk about Mission 2025, but also this is a live taping of our podcast, Outrage and Optimism. Who has heard the podcast, Outrage and Optimism? Woo! All right. Okay. And this year we are doing something we've not done before. And you may have heard about this if you've been listening to the podcast, which is we're doing a special series in partnership with the COP Presidency called Inside COP, where we're going to be going deep into everything over the next couple of months as the world tries to get back on track. And at the end of this session, I'm going to explain to you a bit more about what that's going to mean in terms of our episodes. But now I would like to just tell you why we're doing that. Because why would you do something like that at this moment? This process is not exactly winning any popularity contests. It's slow, it's frustrating. We've had 30 COPs. I know Simon's sitting in the front row. We've had 30 COPs and we're not making progress. Why would we double down on this? Well, I would like to propose to you a counterintuitive thought that we have been having in Global Optimism and that Cristiano and I have been discussing, which is this is the best moment for the climate negotiations in at least the last 10 years. It's taken a while to get to this point where we know that what is needed to get back on track is going to be transformational change in the way we bring the process back into line with the real economy. And in the real economy, astonishing things are happening. We have amazing leadership in Simon, in the presidency of Brazil. This is going to be a great few months and we're very excited about it. So we'll get to that in a minute.
Amazing. Thank you all for being here again. We know that the world is changing. It's complex. It seems like kind of the only predictable thing is that everything is unpredictable and incredibly hard and complex. But we also know that those who have the courage to act, to lead, those first movers do have an advantage. We're seeing that in the data. Africa has been importing over 60% year on year decentralized solar. That's huge. That is changing that continent. That is bringing education and electricity to communities that never had it before. We also know that the lessons from the US is helping other countries leapfrog. To talk more about this, I want to invite to stage Dr. Arun Abha Ghosh to talk to us about this. He's the CEO of the Council on Energy, Environment and Water and COP30 envoy to South Asia. Welcome. Hi, so nice to have you with us. So I thought we could start just by you talking about what countries are driving the transition.
Emerging markets and developing economies. Nearly 90% of all new electricity infrastructure is going to be built in these geographies. And they're not waiting around. They are leapfrogging across the world, whether it's Southeast Asia, South Asia, Sub-Saharan Africa, South America. You have countries that have a higher share of electricity in their energy mix than many other developed economies. And secondly, that the share of clean energy in that electricity mix is increasing. This is being driven by two things. Number one, of course, cost of the technology is coming down. But more importantly, it's also being driven by the way you design markets. Just a few days ago in India, we've just discovered through reverse auctions, solar plus storage in one of the state bids under 3 rupees a unit. So unless we design markets that are competitive, that crowd in not just the technology developers, but also the market innovators, you're not going to be able to scale this up. One more driver, of course, is that this needs to go beyond the energy transition to talking about the economic transformation. That means we're talking about jobs, growth, and sustainability. In India, We already have created over 1 million jobs in the clean energy sector alone. But we could be creating about 36 million jobs once we leverage decentralized energy. Growth. When we talk about bringing in investments, now upwards of $50, $70 billion coming in, we also have to think, where's the investment going? Is it just large projects or is it smaller infrastructure? Leveraging distributed energy for clean energy, for livelihoods is a $50 billion market opportunity in India. We see in Bangladesh next door some of the largest deployment in distributed energy. We see in Nepal and Bhutan huge potential for hydropower, but also to become potentially the power banks of the region. And then we go down south to a country like Sri Lanka or Maldives, where, of course, you're buffeted by rising sea levels, climatic shocks, but you also have big drivers for clean energy infrastructure, but also the savings on importing diesel for your electricity access. So when you bring all of this together, our focus, our attention needs to shift from New York to New Delhi, right? From Boston to Bangladesh, right? And this is when we begin to understand that when you look at solutions ground up, you get not just the technologies, but the business models that are much more disaggregated, much more distributed, much more decentralized, much more democratized.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And I would love for you to say, is there something consistently that you feel it in when you're in region, when you're in these countries, seeing these examples, that you see as something that could be scaled all over in this regard?
I think the one thing that we can be scaling, let me say two things that we can be scaling. Number one is better understanding of how climate risks are impacting our regions and our geographies in a hyper-local way. We've got to think about climate models not just as big pixels on our maps, to understanding at a country level, at a provincial level, at a city level, at a district level, at a neighborhood by neighborhood level, do we have an understanding of heat risk? My organization is developing such heat action plans for 300 cities in India. Do we have an understanding of flood early warnings? We were talking about this just early this morning at the Solutions Dialogue. Granular understanding of risk is the first step for solving what I consider is the biggest market failure, which is the lack of insurance cover for the vulnerable who are impacted. And we need to scale up these solutions across the global south so that we are not just making general statements about vulnerability, but putting in the building blocks for resilience. The second thing that needs to be scaled up and could be scaled up is actually leveraging the digital revolution. The digital revolution allows us to consider whether it is climate risk or whether it's the energy transition. Once we start creating digital twins of our cities, of our rivers, of our oceans, of our lakes, of our ponds, of our buildings, we're able to not just map out the risk, but we are also able to map out the potential for solar energy, the potential for energy storage, the potential for trading this. So you start not just having clean electrons, but peer-to-peer trading of those clean electrons. So I think it's like a double helix. The digital revolution and the decarbonization revolution can begin to come together. These are two sort of parallel universes that are sort of on play across the world. But if we can find platforms to bring them together, we can really begin to take this phrase, we say leapfrog, to something that is real, that is tangible, that is visible, and that delivers outcomes, solutions here and now. We've just talked about early warning systems earlier this morning. We've talked about digital public infrastructure this afternoon. I think the main thing holding us back is perhaps lack of imagination.
Thank you so much for your insights.
Thank you.
Dr. Ghosh, everyone, thank you, thank you. I love that, double helix. That is really brilliant. It's not only countries that are driving this change, but also people. I'm delighted to invite to stage Lindsay Levin, head of TED Countdown, to talk with me a little bit more about this. Lindsay.
Cool. Great to be here.
Yeah, great to have you. So as the head of TED Countdown, you hear all the time from individuals who are driving innovation, driving change, designing the world ahead, who have contributed so much to change. What are people doing every day now to drive change in a way that inspires you?
Yeah, I mean, one of the very cool things about my job is I have to get out a lot and see what's going on in the world. And when you do that, people all over the place are doing a ton of things.
Yeah.
Here in the US, yes, I'm a citizen, despite our rolling back, there are people doing all kinds of things, whether that's activism, whether that's what you build into your business, what you bring into your job, personal choices that you make. I think the piece I really want to single out, and it echoes our previous speaker, is the people who are acting out of necessity. So we held our last summit in Nairobi. 700 people came together in June. Some of you were there. And it was phenomenal in terms of the energy, in terms of the spirit, in terms of the ideas, the speakers that we gathered from around Africa. One of the things we did was a survey of young people. We surveyed 1,200 young people in the lead up to it. Over 70%, their lives were being directly impacted now. 44% severely impacted. 28% had either had to relocate or they knew people who'd had to relocate because of climate. Now, the result of it, it's very unfortunate that it drives that, but the result of that is they're doing a ton of things. They don't necessarily call it climate, but they're doing a ton of things, from cleaning up neighborhoods, sorting out flooding, resilient farming, etc.
Wow, that is so amazing. Polls say, I'm sure many of us in the room have heard this percentage said. It says polls say that 89% of people support more ambitious action on climate from their governments. I would love for you to kind of connect the dots. How could we harness that into activating decision makers?
I mean, I challenge the 89%. I think it's easy to say you care about this. 89% of people may say they care about it. Unfortunately, in certain economies, it's way down the list.
Yeah.
They don't care enough about it for it to be at the top of the list. And I think those of us working in this space, including, storytellers like Ted, we have to kind of hold ourselves accountable to that. We've not made it relatable.
Yeah.
It doesn't relate to everyday things, the everyday things people care about: health, jobs, affordability, and so forth. So if we want to engage people more, we're going to have to think differently about literally how we pull people in. What do they trust? Who do they trust? And the final thing I'd say on that is, we're used in climate to thinking about the fact that it's an ecosystem, it's a biosphere, everything's connected. And yet we've ended up making climate kind of separate, like it's this silo: there's climate, there's health, there's jobs. Everything's connected. And unfortunately, we're at a point now, certainly in Europe and North America, where unless we work on the interconnection of this, we're not going to win. We're not going to win. So I think we've got to think very differently about how we engage with people, listen to people, and relate to what they care about.
Yeah, so well said. Thank you, Lindsay.
Thank you
so much.
Thanks.
To talk a little bit about that new language, that new vernacular that we need, Tom.
Thanks, V. Great. Okay, so we have two more quick conversations for you, and this one is picking up from where that left off. How do we make this more relatable to people? How do we get more people engaged in this issue and talk to people where they are? Please join me in welcoming to the stage Columbia professor, author, band member of Agent. So I'm going to tell the quick story about this before I go up here. I promised him I wouldn't introduce him like this anymore, but I'm going to do it anyway. Last year, I was at a dinner, and Al Gore was there, and Adam Met, who I'm about to introduce, was also there. And Adam was talking to Al about all sorts of things that he was doing. And then at one point, Adam had to get up and leave. And I turned over to Al and said, "Oh, you've been chatting with Adam. How do you find it?" And he goes, "He makes me feel like I wasted my life." The number of things that Adam does. So Adam Met, please join me.
Oh, I hate that introduction. My God. Hi, everyone.
So, Adam, two questions for you. The
Yep.
first one, you're a band member. We just heard about making this relatable to more people. You communicate with millions of fans. What have you learned? What are we doing wrong, and what can we do better?
We are doing so much wrong, and yet we're also doing so much right. And I like to pace around because I tend to do this on stage too, so forgive me. I'm going to walk over.
I'll
to
stand over here.
Back away. Okay.
Yeah.
So, well, what are we doing right first? There's so many different spaces where we are really good at connecting with people. We're really good at connecting with people in the music industry and sports and any of these places where we've built fan bases really effectively. So I've spent the last couple of years figuring out what are those strategies for building fan bases that we can then use and apply to building better movements. So I'm not just talking about the surface level. I'm talking about really deeply what are those core ideas of building effective movements and how can we apply them to build a better climate movement. And so I really am excited about a bunch of these strategies, and we can get into it in a minute.
So let's get onto that right away.
Yeah.
Because you came on the podcast last week.
Yes.
And you talked about this declaration you've been worked on,
Yes.
which is essentially, on one level, it's kind of a critique of the climate movement
Sure.
and a suggestion of how we can evolve.
Yeah.
We got a lot of mail about that.
Oh,
a lot of
good.
people were really interested in what you said.
Okay.
So set out for everybody what this was.
I love mail. I don't get that much mail anymore.
Really, we'll share ours with you.
Thank
There
you.
go, Yeah.
So from writing this book about, I don't know, like over the last year and a half or so, that was about this idea that I just talked about. I then took those strategies and put it into this, what we're calling the neo-industrial revolution, which is a declaration for building a new climate movement, in particular in America. And it's based on this premise that we are failing. Yes, we have been successful in many specific ways. There's been massive legislation in the US, but overall, as a movement, we're failing. And when I say movement, it's not just talking about the activists. It's not just talking about the big green organizations, but it's the combination of the city and state governments, like we were talking about, the universities. Yes, big green organizations and activists, but companies, the federal government, the culture sector. And so what we did is we took two very concrete strategies. One is taking a new lexicon for climate, meaning not using the language of climate outside of rooms like this, talking about like what you were mentioning before, how we get from place to place, how we power things, jobs, economics, things like that, and applying them to all of these different sectors that I just mentioned. But the other one is looking at how we can move away from the narrative of individual action. Even the idea of putting solar on top of people's houses, that's individual action. There's so many policies that are happening at the city, state, and local level across the US and across the world that can be scaled so easily. They're systemic changes. And so what this declaration does, it's a pamphlet, and I have a bunch of physical copies here for anyone who wants it. It really goes sector by sector and say, okay, how can we take both this new lexicon and a very specific approach to collective action and apply them to each of these sectors, to companies, to universities, to big green organizations, to cities and states, to even the federal government, even if we might have to wait a little bit longer to apply those solutions.
It's brilliant. There are copies over here. It's amazing.
Yes.
Adam, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody. Okay, so we have one more quick conversation, and then we're going to hear from the Executive Secretary in a minute. And for the next conversation, we're going to hear about business. And I would like to welcome my good friend, Chief Sustainability Officer, VP of Sustainability of Amazon, Cara Hurst.
Hi, Tom.
Hey, Cara, good to see you. So this is an interesting context we're all operating in. I have three questions for you.
Great.
We don't have long, but we're going to try and charge into it. Just give us a snapshot of what Amazon's doing in this context.
Great. Well, we are doing many things, and actually, this is a great connected conversation because one of the things that we're doing is we are changing our operations. So that's first and foremost. We are decarbonizing fast. We've committed to being net zero on our global operations by 2040 with the climate pledge that we worked with you and Christiana. And now I want to say we're announcing this week we're up to 600 signatories on that. So I think what's really interesting about that is that collective action piece that you're just talking about. No one company can do this alone. It takes that collective action. So we're working through our supply chains. We're working with our customers. We're working with our partners, all of our suppliers, and each and every industry that we're in across Amazon, which is many industries, and trying to send those big demand signals. So decarbonizing our operations is the main thing that we can do, which means electrifying our fleet, changing our buildings, buying clean energy, thinking about our products differently, all of that all the time. Big thing we're focused on, but we're also reinventing products for our customers all the time. And then importantly, really thinking about AI right now as a big solution and a big driver for how we're going to do sustainability differently, because it's here and it's an absolute solution for a lot of the things
that
we
must
do.
be a big grapple because it's also a big topic in terms of the impact.
It is,
Yeah.
but we need to embrace it, and we're finding lots of ways to use it really creatively to drive solutions for sustainability. And we need to do that on behalf of the customers and the partners that we work for. So we find that there's lots of ways it can be a time saver. There's ways that we can digitize data. We can make carbon accounting. We can make data available. We can harmonize things. We can go so fast with AI and do things that we've all been waiting for in this space for so many years.
And talk to us a little bit about what you're seeing, your supply chain, those 600 companies. Are you seeing continued enthusiasm and determination to move forward?
I think that's one of the myths I want to bust. I mean, a lot of the times people are saying, we're seeing a retrenchment. We saw another 100 companies join the pledge this year. So we're continuing to see momentum. We're continuing to see it across geography. We're continuing to see it across industry. That is a hefty commitment to right now commit to decarbonizing and being net zero carbon by 2040. We're seeing it across many, many industries. We're seeing it in industries where we've had trouble getting traction before. We had over 30 companies in the fashion industry join. So we're seeing joint action projects too. It's not just making the commitment, but we now have 21 projects that we're doing in joint action. And these are things like coming together and doing joint buying of better concrete and steel. We have a cement initiative. We're doing a project in India, like you talked about, Dr. Ghosh, where we're buying with Lane Shift with C40, and we're looking at decarbonizing that middle mile with electrification of heavy duty trucks, because that's where we have 3% of all the trucks on the road, right, are we need to flip that. They're creating 34% of the emissions, right? But it's really about how do we take each one of these things, whether it's energy or it's materials or it's transportation, and we think about these big joint solutions together. So these projects are not about just making the commitment, but saying, what sector are you in? What demand signals can you send? And how do we work together?
Okay, that's so encouraging. And then final question before we hear from Simon. We have a big COP coming up. They're all big COPs, but this is a big one, and it's an ambition year.
Bigger every year.
Bigger every year, yeah. What do you want to see from that?
Well, we're excited always about the role that business can play there and bringing folks together. And I think nature always also seems to be playing a bigger and bigger role every year. So putting nature-based solutions at the top of the agenda and making sure all people are involved in those indigenous communities have a seat at the table. But I think the role that nature-based solutions can play will be particularly important in Brazil this year. So excited about that.
Amazing. Cara, thank you so much. Okay, so that comes to the end of our quick interview part, and we're now going to hear, if he's willing, the man with famously the most difficult job on the planet, the Executive Secretary of the UNFCCC, Simon Steele.
Okay, thank you, Tom. And it's great to be here this afternoon. So, friends, people often ask me, what needs to happen from here? In truth, many things, but let me boil it down. This new era of climate action must be about bringing our process closer to the real economy, accelerating implementation, and spreading the colossal benefits of climate action to billions more people. Connecting the cabinet rooms closer to the boardrooms, to the living rooms, is how we supercharge climate action and get this job done. No easy task, but together we can build an extraordinary foundation. Because if we look past the noise, the facts show a world aligning with the Paris Agreement. Investments in renewables has increased tenfold in 10 years. The clean energy transition is booming across almost all major economies and hit $2 trillion last year alone. But this boom is uneven. Its vast benefits are not shared by all. Meanwhile, climate disasters are hitting every economy and society harder every year. So we need to step it up, and we need to step it up fast. The good news, we're not waiting for miracles. The economics are on our side. Today, over 90% of new renewables cost less than the cheapest new fossil option. The technologies and solutions already exist. clean power, electrification, efficiency and storage, resilience building. The toolkits are there and being put to work. But to ramp up implementation, we need that toolkit in every nation's hands. Because the next step is to extend this Paris alignment country by country, sector by sector, across every stream of finance, using the next global stocktake as the timeline to get there. To succeed in a fast-changing world, we must enhance the force multipliers. Take industrial transformation. Clean energy, the clean industry underpins stronger economies, more resilient supply chains, lower costs, and lower emissions. Yet $1.6 trillion worth of projects remain idle. That is wasted potential. In the next 5 years, we can unleash huge progress, powered by innovators and entrepreneurs, enabled by Paris-aligned governments, creating millions of good jobs. That is why I fully support Build Clean Now, a global initiative to fast-track clean energy and industry shifts led by the Industrial Transition Accelerator, being launched later this afternoon. The same principle applies to AI. AI is not a ready-made solution, and it carries risks, but it can also be a game changer. So we now need to blunt its dangerous edges, sharpen its catalytic ones, and put it astutely to work. I echo the Secretary General. If you run a major AI platform, power it with renewables and innovate to drive energy efficiency. Jobs and livelihoods must be protected. Done properly, AI releases human capacity, not replaces it. That is our approach within the Secretariat as we explore how AI can improve our own work. Most important, it is powered to drive real-world outcomes, managing microgrids, mapping climate risks, guiding resilience planning, and this is just the beginning. As this new era of implementation gathers pace, we must also keep evolving and striving towards faster, fully inclusive, higher quality decisions that tie the formal process ever closer to real economies and real lives. I've asked senior experts to examine how our process could be improved within our mandates from parties. Later this year, I'll receive their ideas and feedback. And we wish to pursue any wish to pursue. We'll consult on them in 2026, foremost with parties who ultimately own this process. But friends, should we also never lose sight of how far we have come? Imperfect, yes, but recent COPs have delivered concrete results and global steps forward. Without UN climate cooperation, we're headed for 5 degrees of heating, an impossible future. Today, we're closer to 3 degrees, still too high, but bending the curve. Later this year, we'll see how much closer the next round of plan gets us to 1.5. We'll also release a status report on adaptation efforts and an initial picture of implementation from transparency reports. The roadmap to 1.3 trillion is also expected from the COP29 and COP30 presidencies before the COP. We must be clear-eyed in recognizing what all this data tells us. both the risks and the opportunities. And then it's all eyes on COP30. What must it do? It must respond to the state of the NDCs, to the roadmap to $1.3 trillion annually of accessible finance, deployable at speed and scale, to progress made and where acceleration is most needed. It must show climate multilateralism continues to deliver with strong outcomes across all negotiations. It must spur faster and wider implementation across all sectors and economies, especially those not yet pricing in climate risks and opportunities. And it must leave no one behind. That means delivering for the most vulnerable in all regions, especially emerging and developing countries. And it must speak more clearly to billions more people, showing that bold climate action means better jobs, higher living standards, cleaner air, healthier lives, secure food, affordable energy and transport. This is the story of the new economy rising. And this COP30 podcast series by Outrage and Optimism is a great chance to tell it to more people around the world. Friends, let's also recognize that the world's climate story doesn't begin or end at COP30. Every COP builds on the last. That is how we forge progress and deliver real results. Every COP has its challenges, and there are always naysayers. But they are only the story if we make them the story. Right now, we need to reaffirm, sending a stronger, unmistakable signal. The world is still rock solid behind Paris and fully on board for climate cooperation because it works, and together we will make it work faster. Not only at COP, but here in New York, at the G20, at pre-COP, and at every forum. So let's keep it up and let's step it up. Humanity cannot afford to let it stumble. Let's recognize, reaffirm, respond. This is the path to, through, and beyond. Beleng, I thank you.
See. Thank you so much, Simon. Hugely appreciate that vision and the necessity and the importance of these coming months. These are difficult political moments. What Simon perhaps can't say in his role is that the NDCs will not be sufficient to get us to 1.5. We can say that pretty certainly, but they will hopefully move us in a positive direction. But also, it's not only about NDCs. It's about a whole of society approach. It's about a mobilization of all different stakeholders, which all of you know. And to discuss that, I'd like to invite the climate champion for the COP, Dan Yoshby, to join us on the stage.
Hi, welcome. See,
Good to see you, Dan.
so you never know how many cases it fits.
As many as possible.
So Dan, I mean, we've heard a vision from the executive secretary. We've heard from others. We know that we are going to need, well done. We are going to need the action agenda there in force. You are responsible for coordinating all of these different stakeholders and identifying how it can be refreshed with renewed enthusiasm and momentum in Belém. How are you going to do it?
Simon already said it's all clear. No, I think what we're trying to do here is to build from what was done in the past. We found out that we had around 600 initiatives that already existed. And we have this willingness to implement. That's our sole willingness to COP30 from the presidency, from the climate champions team, and I think here is Simon as well from UNFCCC, from the Marrakesh Partnership. So what we tried to do was to build a revised or reviewed architecture of the climate action agenda, which would make feasible to implement as much as possible. So in order to do that, why should we come up with new initiatives ourselves or new pledges, which takes a lot of energy and time of the parties and all the companies and communities, academia? Let's work on those existing initiatives and let's make them happen. From there, we draw this 6 axes that talk to global stocktake all the time. There is no word in there which is not already agreed by the parties long time ago. And we, within those 6 axes, we plotted 30 key objectives, which for this moment in time seem to be very relevant. And then we invited those 600 initiatives to gather in those 30 key objectives. So each key objective has an activation group formed by or coordinated by the presidency of COP30 and by Climate Champions team, helped by a consultant and with all the owners of the initiatives in there. What do we expect? First, we're going to have a very good knowledge of those initiatives, and we will probably have KPIs for all of them. And there will be a lot of transparency for all of us to join and to participate as much as possible.
I don't want to interrupt you, but just 600 mapped across all these different, there must be a lot of crossover. Are you looking to like rationalize it and make it simpler?
Well, first we wanted to bring them all in.
Okay.
And we are not in a position to say, this is good, this is bad.
Sure.
That's not the intent. We really want them to live or not live, depending on their own purpose and viability. Right now, 300 are moving more than the other 300. Okay. Let's see how we get this over time. Very important point. We didn't draw this for COP30. It doesn't make sense. We really want to have this over time. And COP30 has an obligation to deliver a 5-year strategy for this action agenda. So hopefully this can be the heart of it. Of course, we're not in a position to impose or to say what further presidencies will do or the parties will decide over time. But if we do a good job, my personal experience is that that's very supportive and people like to build upon good stuff. So hopefully that will be the case. So end of the day, there is this mapping, this KPI process, the knowledge process, but maybe more important, for the most promising ones, the activation groups will probably be a solving area where we debottleneck, as I say, or we get the roadblocks out and we manage to speed up, scale things, and get them quicker and bigger as much as possible. That's good for everybody. That's good for financing as well, because we churn resources quickly.
Now, I know Theo wants to come in with a question, but just on that, first of all, thank you, because I'm not sure we could have just kept going with more and more initiatives being launched at every COP. It becomes very confusing, right?
We could have.
And I think and that's part of the problem, I think, also with the media narrative, is that the media comes to a COP, they don't really understand always the clarity of the action agenda, and so they look at the negotiations and they don't quite see how the two things fit together. I'm hoping what you will do will clarify that.
And honestly, we have an expectation that most probably the problem solving could feed the negotiation.
Right.
It's a very good base to look and say, well, this is what is missing.
Yeah.
Not only the negotiation, but the country by country practice.
Right.
Right? As a Brazilian, I'm Brazilian, I would love my country to have a complete strategy based on sustainability. It makes a lot of sense to Brazil. It makes a lot of sense to Africa and so probably for the whole world, right? So I'm very optimistic about this process, but it's the beginning.
Yeah.
And of course, we need to work over it over time. And that's the proposition of COP30, to tentatively start a cycle, a very strong cycle of implementation and collective action. We call the mutirão. That's the word that we use there. But that's the intent.
So you're going to map out where everything is, figure out what's there, figure out what success looks like for those initiatives, and then use them as a solutions hub to drive action even further. That sounds pretty awesome. My question is, what can this room, what can people listening, what can all of us do to support that?
Well, participate. Get into those activation groups directly or indirectly. Of course, we cannot put dozens of millions of companies or entities in the groups. It's not going to work. But we can have a good structure of representation on the NGOs, entities that are close and that know what they're talking about and that can be constructive and unbiased and allow this process to flow. That's our intent. So participation is the most relevant action that we can have. And just one point here that as we move forward and we have this debottlenecking, we would like to work 365 days per year on this. So we cannot have stop and go. We cannot start a process in April and then in November. That's not going to be very supportive. As I tell the champions team from my practice, no buffers. No buffers. Let's use 100% of the time, 100% of our capabilities, of our energy to solve the problem. So if we can be constructive and we can show that to the subsequent owners of this process, maybe we can work January 1st, January 2nd, January 3rd, right? And that can be more supportive to the negotiators, to the local authorities, to the financiers, to the scientists, whoever needs to be part of the process, one by one. And by the way, we have 30 key objectives there. Okay, we're not going to get all of them excellent. But if some of them are excellent, then we build time to fix the others.
Yeah.
That's a good approach.
Amazing. Dan, Yoshpi, thank you so much. Good luck. We look forward to supporting you in Brazil. Wonderful. Okay, so we are coming to the end of our time together. Thank you for joining us. I just want to let you know that now this Inside COP series, which we'll be launching now, will be coming out as a second episode with its special music and artwork and things like that. It'll come into your feed if you subscribe to the podcast. I think in a minute there'll be a QR code. You can scan it and subscribe. We were just going to have a little bit of a wrap up in terms of what we heard. But, you know, I've just noticed that, and I'd say this in full confidence that he'd do the same thing to me, that Nigel Topping is sitting in the front row. And I would love to hear Nigel's reflections on what he's heard. So come and join us, Nigel. Oh.
This wasn't bad.
So, Nigel, it wasn't planned. Exactly, yeah.
Thanks, Tom.
Welcome, yeah. So, Nigel, you've heard here a variety of perspectives, you know, a process that needs to renew itself and keep moving forward, an action agenda that's being refreshed, business that's moving forward, a desire for citizens to get more engaged. You're now running Ambition Loop, this very interesting company looking at these mechanisms and how we can get more momentum. What are you seeing and what's your reflection on having sat here for the last 45 minutes? Where we are in this process and what we need to do now?
I mean, I hesitate to use the word optimism. It can sound not serious enough, right? But I would say I'm sort of more groundedly optimistic than ever. Anyway, I think we're being. I think some of the political headwinds are forcing us to be much more honest about how hard this work is, about how we really have to not just assert that there's going to be lots of jobs and lots of profit, but that they have to be delivered to real people in real communities on the ground. So I think there's a maturity of narrative from this community, including a reasonable degree of humility that sometimes we just got a bit overexcited about our own language, our own lexicon, and I think what the Brazilian presidency is doing to rebalance the choreography of the COPs from being 99% negotiations, which frankly the media and NGOs I think have often perpetuated.
Well, and make that worse.
Yeah. You know, remember, if we put 99% of our effort on half of the problem and 1% of our effort on half of the problem, then we're not going to solve the problem. So I think this rebalancing, and I think the call to the mutirão, a global mobilization, and in the very bold but humble way in which Dan and the presidency have laid this out, inviting the best of the collaborative initiatives to come to the fore with the intent of establishing an architecture of action, which has been emerging but hasn't risen to have the level of attention that the negotiations have had. I think that's something we should.
Yeah.
I think we can afford to be excited about it, take it really seriously, recognize it won't be perfect. There'll be gaps that need to be built on, but in particular, work to make that a legacy of COP30 that then becomes the way COPs are done in the future. So we don't go back to, oh yeah, Brazil did a lot of action agenda stuff.
Right.
Now let's go back to 99% negotiations when the rules are largely set.
Yeah.
And it's the realm of action that we need to and problem solving that need to be in. So I think I'm groundedly optimistic and really pleased with some of the shifts and some of the ways that we as a community are learning and getting more sophisticated and rebalancing their choreography.
So would you agree, Sian, with what I said to begin with, that counterintuitively this is almost the best moment for the climate process in the last 10 years?
I mean,
That says it all.
yeah, I think that I would love to be gushingly enthusiastic and say yes, but I think there are grounded reasons for positivity, but there are also some really troubling headwinds. So I know you're not suggesting we be naive about those, but I do think there's an inflection point of being more grounded.
Yeah.
But the thing I think that it behooves all of us to do is to learn that when we hit these inflection points, our lexicon often needs to change, as Adam was saying, and the skills we need, right? So I think that so much of this now becomes about policy and mobilizing finance, right? And that means that those of us who've been involved in this movement who don't understand policy and don't understand finance either need to get out of the way or learn a bit more about policy making, about finance, because that's where, and invite those who are experts in those to be part of the problem solving, not say that they've just got to do their job, because it's hard for everybody.
Very nice. All right. Thank you.
Thanks for the surprise.
All right. Great. Yeah, very good. Fee, any closing thoughts from you?
Well, thank you all for being here. I think one of the things I've been really reflecting on is that so often when times are complex, it's kind of up to each of us to determine what the future holds. The glass can be half empty or it can be half full. And I don't say that to be glibly, optimistic about the future, but there are real examples. My job every day is working with companies as a part of the Climate Pledge who are, it's windy out there. They're walking like this against the headwinds, and that's totally possible. It's happening. There are examples all over the place of this happening, and it's also very easy to point out the things that are going wrong, and we should be very honest about that, about the way in which that's making progress harder and more complex. But complexity doesn't mean abandoning ship. When the storm hits, that's when you hunker down, you pull out the oars, you trust your captains, you don't get in the more flimsy lifeboats. So that's kind of where I am. Join us on this journey to see if I evolve any other directions.
Amazing. Thank you, Fee. Thank you all for being here. Please subscribe to the podcast. See you soon.